The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Sophia Carter hurried down the dusty main street of Placitas, New Mexico, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders and glancing nervously over her shoulder with each step she took. The year was 1878, and in this unforgiving corner of the territory, a woman alone after sunset was inviting trouble she had been desperately trying to avoid since arriving 3 months ago. Sophia quickened her pace as she passed the saloon, the raucous laughter and piano music spilling out into the evening air. She had stayed too long at Mrs. Abernathy's general store, helping the elderly woman organize a new shipment of fabrics, and now darkness was falling faster than she had anticipated. Her small rented room was just 2 blocks away, but those 2 blocks suddenly seemed miles long. "Well, well," came a slurred voice from the shadows between buildings. "If it ain't the pretty new schoolteacher out for an evening stroll." Sophia's heart pounded as Victor Holloway stepped into her path, blocking her way. He was the wealthy owner of the largest cattle ranch outside of town, a man used to getting whatever he wanted, and for weeks now what he wanted was Sophia. "Mr. Holloway," she said, keeping her voice steady, "please excuse me, I must get home." "Now, don't be in such a hurry, Miss Carter." His breath reeked of whiskey as he moved closer. "I've been patient with you, but a man's patience only stretches so far." "I've made my feelings clear, sir," Sophia said, raising her chin despite her fear. At 23, she had come west to start a new life after her parents' deaths in Philadelphia. Teaching in Placitas had seemed like a perfect fresh start until Holloway had set his sights on her. "I'm not interested in your attentions." Victor's face darkened. "You ain't got many options out here, woman. I'm offering you a fine house, nice clothes, and my protection. What more could you want?" "I want to be left alone," she answered firmly. "Now please let me pass." His hand shot out, gripping her arm with bruising force. "No woman says no to Victor Holloway. I believe this one just did." The voice came from behind them, deep and steady. Sophia turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the fading sunset. As he stepped forward, she could make out his features' strong jaw covered with a few days' growth of beard, intense eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat, and broad shoulders dusted with the dirt of the trail. "This ain't your business, stranger," Victor snarled. "I'm making it my business," the man replied, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "Let the lady go." To Sophia's surprise, Holloway released her arm, though his face contorted with rage. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Don't much care either," the stranger said, moving to stand beside Sophia. The lady made her wishes clear. "You'll regret this," Victor spat, backing away. "Both of you?" He turned and stalked toward the saloon, his boots kicking up dust with each angry step. Sophia let out a shaky breath. "Thank you, sir. Mr. Holloway can be persistent," the stranger nodded. "Nathan Jones," he introduced himself, "just rode into town looking for work. Sophia Carter, I'm the schoolteacher here." She hesitated, then added, "I should warn you that Mr. Holloway is a powerful man in Placitas." "He won't take kindly to being confronted," Nathan shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first rich man I've annoyed, madam. May I see you safely home? Seems to me the streets ain't too friendly after dark." Sophia nodded gratefully. As they walked the short distance to her boarding house, she studied him from the corner of her eye. His clothes were dusty but well-maintained, and despite his rugged appearance, there was something gentle in the way he kept a respectful distance as they walked. "What brings you to Placitas, Mr. Jones?" she asked. "Heard they're hiring at the Reynolds Ranch," he replied. "I've been working cattle since I was 15, but the last outfit I was with broke up after a hard winter." "Mr. Reynolds is a good man," Sophia said. "And his wife supplies the school with fresh milk for the children's lunches." They reached the small boarding house where Sophia rented a room. The porch light glowed welcomingly as she turned to thank him. "I appreciate your intervention, Mr. Jones. It was fortunate you came along when you did." "Just happened to be in the right place," he said with a slight smile. "Good night, Miss Carter. Stay safe." As Sophia watched him walk away, disappearing into the gathering darkness, she couldn't help but feel that something had shifted in her carefully ordered world. She shook off the thought and hurried inside, aware of the curious gaze of Mrs. Winters, the boarding house owner who sat knitting in the parlor. "Who was that gentleman, Miss Carter?" the older woman asked, her eyes sharp with interest. "Just a kind stranger," Sophia replied. "He helped me avoid an unpleasant encounter with Mr. Holloway." Mrs. Winters clicked her tongue. "That Holloway is becoming a nuisance, but be careful with strangers, dear. This territory is full of men running from something." "Yes, Mrs. Winters, good night." Sophia climbed the stairs to her small room, her mind replaying the brief encounter. She wondered if she would see Nathan Jones again and was surprised by how much she hoped she would. The next morning, Sophia rose early, as was her habit. The schoolhouse was a short walk from town, a simple one-room building that served the children of Placitas and the surrounding ranches. She loved her work, finding fulfillment in teaching the 20-odd pupils who ranged in age from 6 to 16. As she approached the schoolhouse, she was startled to see Nathan Jones leaning against the hitching post outside, hat in hand. He straightened when he saw her coming. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said, his voice carrying in the clear air. "Mr. Jones," she acknowledged, curiosity evident in her tone, "this is an unexpected visit. I spoke with Reynolds this morning. He's taken me on for a trial period." He shifted, seeming almost uncomfortable. "Thought you should know that Holloway was in the saloon last night making threats." "Seems he's not one to forget a slight." Sophia's stomach clenched with anxiety, but she kept her expression calm. "Thank you for the warning. Unfortunately, Mr. Holloway doesn't seem to understand the meaning of no. Men like that rarely do." Nathan's eyes met hers, and for a moment neither spoke. "I thought, well, if you'd permit it, I could accompany you after school, just until Holloway cools down." Sophia should have refused. She barely knew this man after all. But something in his steady gaze reassured her, and Victor Holloway's threats were not to be taken lightly. "That would be most kind," she found herself saying. "School dismisses at 3 o'clock. Nathan nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll be here." He hesitated, then added, "Be careful today, Miss Carter." As he walked away toward his horse, Sophia watched him go, aware of an unfamiliar fluttering in her chest. She shook her head slightly and unlocked the schoolhouse door, determined to focus on the day ahead rather than on tall cowboys with kind eyes. The school day passed normally, though Sophia found her thoughts drifting occasionally to Nathan Jones. She had just dismissed the children and was erasing the chalkboard when she heard the door open behind her. "You're prompt, Mr. Jones," she said without turning around. "I just need to gather my Jones ain't here," came Victor Holloway's voice, sending a chill through her. "But I am." Sophia whirled to face him, instinctively backing up until she felt the chalkboard against her shoulders. "Mr. Holloway, the schoolhouse is closed for the day." He advanced slowly into the room, his expensive boots echoing on the wooden floor. Despite the early hour, she could smell whiskey on him. "That cowboy's got you fooled if you think he can protect you." "I don't need protection," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I simply need you to respect my wishes and leave me alone." Victor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty schoolroom. "You're just playing hard to get, women like you always do." He was only a few feet away now. "I'm a patient man, Sophia, but my patience is running thin." "I think the lady was clear yesterday," came Nathan's voice from the doorway, "and she's being clear now." Relief flooded through Sophia as Victor spun around. Nathan stood in the doorway, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. "You've got a knack for bad timing, cowboy," Victor snarled. "Seems to me my timing's just fine." Nathan stepped into the room. "Miss Carter, are you ready to leave?" "Yes," she said quickly, moving to gather her books and shawl. Victor's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. "We ain't finished our conversation." "Take your hand off her," Nathan said, his voice deceptively soft but carrying a deadly undertone. "Or what?" Victor challenged, tightening his grip until Sophia gasped in pain. Nathan moved faster than Sophia would have thought possible. In one fluid motion, he crossed the room and broke Victor's grip on her arm, then pushed the rancher back several steps. "Or that," he said simply, Victor's face contorted with rage. "You're a dead man, Jones, you hear me? Dead." He stormed out of the schoolhouse, slamming the door behind him. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his eyes sweeping over her with concern. Sophia nodded, rubbing her arm where Victor had grabbed her. "Yes, thank you for arriving when you did." "I came early," he admitted. "Had a feeling Holloway might try something." He picked up her books. "Let me carry these for you." As they walked back toward town, Sophia was acutely aware of his presence beside her. "Have you found accommodation in town?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Reynolds has a bunkhouse for his hands," Nathan replied. "It's nothing fancy, but the company's decent, and the cook knows his way around a pot of beans." Sophia smiled. "That's good to hear." She hesitated, then added, "Mr. Jones, I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Victor Holloway is not a man to cross lightly." "I've dealt with men like him before," Nathan said, his expression giving nothing away. "They're usually all bluster." "I hope you're right," she murmured, "but please be careful." They reached the boarding house and he handed her the books. "I'll be by tomorrow," he said, "same time." "That isn't necessary." "It is," he interrupted gently. "At least until Holloway backs down." Sophia wanted to protest further but found herself nodding instead. "Very well, thank you, Mr. Jones." He tipped his hat and left, and Sophia watched him go, aware that she was looking forward to tomorrow more than she should be. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan became a fixture in Sophia's life. True to his word, he met her after school each day, escorting her safely home. Occasionally, they would stop at the general store or take a longer route through town, their conversations growing deeper as they got to know one another. She learned that he had lost his parents young and had been raised by an uncle who taught him ranching. He had fought briefly for the Union in the last year of the Civil War, though he was reluctant to speak of it. He had a quiet humor that emerged more often as they grew comfortable with each other, and a thoughtfulness that Sophia found increasingly attractive. For his part, Nathan discovered that Sophia had come west after her parents died of influenza within weeks of each other, leaving her alone in Philadelphia with few prospects. Teaching had been her salvation, a way to support herself while doing something meaningful. She loved poetry and could recite Tennyson from memory, a talent that never failed to impress him. The tension with Victor Holloway remained. The rancher had not confronted them directly again, but Sophia often felt his eyes on her in town, and Nathan had mentioned that some of Holloway's men had been asking questions about him at the saloon. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Nathan arrived at the boarding house, surprising Sophia, who had not expected to see him on the weekend. "I thought you might like to take a ride," he said when Mrs. Winters showed him into the parlor. "Reynolds gave me the afternoon off, and it's too fine a day to spend indoors." Sophia hesitated only briefly before agreeing. "That sounds wonderful. Let me get my hat." Mrs. Winters gave her a knowing look as she hurried upstairs, but Sophia pretended not to notice. She had grown fond of Nathan, perhaps more than fond, but she was careful not to let her hopes run too far ahead. Men like him rarely settled in one place for long. Nathan had borrowed a gentle mare from the ranch for Sophia, and they rode out of town along the river that provided water for Placitas. The day was indeed beautiful, with scattered clouds providing occasional relief from the sun. "You ride well," Nathan observed as Sophia guided her horse confidently along the trail. "My father insisted I learn," she replied with a smile. "He said a lady never knows when she might need to make a hasty exit," Nathan laughed. "Wise man, your father." They stopped in a shady spot by the river, tethering the horses and spreading a blanket Nathan had brought. He produced bread, cheese, and apples from his saddlebag, along with a small jar of honey. "A picnic," Sophia said, delighted. "You've thought of everything?" "Mrs. Reynolds helped," he admitted. "She seems to think you don't eat enough." They sat comfortably, enjoying the simple food and the peaceful sounds of the river. When they had finished eating, Nathan leaned back on his elbows, looking out over the water. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about staying in Placitas." Sophia's heart quickened. "Oh. I thought you usually moved on after a season or two." "That was before," he said, his eyes meeting hers, "before I had a reason to stay." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite brave enough to acknowledge it directly. Sophia looked away, her cheeks warm. Placitas is a good town, she said carefully. Despite certain elements, Nathan sat up straighter. Speaking of which, I should tell you that Reynolds heard something yesterday. Holloway's been drinking heavily, making more threats. He's a man used to getting his way, and being refused, especially publicly, has made him dangerous. Sophia sighed. I had hoped he would lose interest and move on to someone more receptive to his attentions. Some men see refusal as a challenge, Nathan said grimly. Particularly men with his kind of power and money. What should we do? Nathan shook his head. Just be careful. Don't go anywhere alone, even in daylight. They sat in silence for a few moments, the pleasant mood of the afternoon dampened by the reminder of Victor's threats. Then Sophia deliberately changed the subject, asking Nathan about his plans at the ranch, and gradually the easy companionship returned. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they packed up the remains of their picnic and mounted the horses for the ride back to town. They were about halfway back when Nathan suddenly reined in, his posture alert. What is it? Sophia asked, pulling her mare to a stop beside him. Riders, he said tersely, pointing to a dust cloud in the distance. Coming fast. They were on an open stretch of trail with little cover. Nathan scanned the area quickly, then pointed to a cluster of cottonwood trees about 100 yards off the trail. Head for those trees, he instructed. Quick as you can. Sophia didn't hesitate, turning her horse and urging it into a trot toward the trees. Nathan followed closely, keeping an eye on the approaching riders. They had just reached the shelter of the cottonwoods when 4 horsemen came into view on the trail. Holloway's men, Nathan muttered, recognizing 2 of them from town. Stay quiet. The riders slowed as they approached the spot where Nathan and Sophia had turned off the trail. One of them, a hard-faced man with a prominent scar across his chin, pointed to the ground. Fresh tracks, he called to the others. They turned off here. Holloway wants the woman unharmed, another reminded him. The cowboy's fair game, though. Sophia's eyes widened in fear as she looked at Nathan. He put a finger to his lips, then quietly dismounted, motioning for her to do the same. He led both horses deeper into the trees, away from the trail, moving as silently as possible over the leaf-strewn ground. The riders had dismounted now and were examining the tracks. One of them started toward the trees. Jones, the scarred man called out. We know you're in there. Send the woman out and maybe we won't shoot you. Nathan drew his revolver, checking that it was loaded. Stay behind me, he whispered to Sophia. If things go bad, take my horse and ride hard for town. Reynolds will help you. I'm not leaving you, she whispered back fiercely. The men were spreading out, approaching the trees from different directions. Nathan knew they couldn't hide forever in the small grove. Making a quick decision, he led Sophia to the far edge of the trees, where the river curved around behind them. We'll have to cross, he said softly. The water will hide our tracks. Sophia nodded, gathering her skirts. The river wasn't deep here, perhaps waist-high at most, but the current was swift. They would need to move quickly. They left the horses tethered, hoping they wouldn't give away their position with neighs or movement. Then, crouching low, they made their way to the riverbank. Ready? Nathan asked, taking her hand. Sophia nodded, squeezing his fingers in return. Together, they slipped into the cold water, gasping at the shock of it. The current immediately tried to pull them downstream, but Nathan kept a firm grip on Sophia's hand as they waded across behind them. They could hear Holloway's men calling to each other as they searched the grove. When they reached the far bank, Nathan pulled Sophia up, both of them dripping and shivering despite the warm day. This way, he said, leading her along the riverbank, keeping to the softer ground where they wouldn't leave obvious footprints. They moved as quickly as they could, staying low and using the brush along the river for cover. A shout from behind told them their absence had been discovered. Gunshots followed, but they were poorly aimed, the shooters firing blindly across the river. Keep going, Nathan urged as Sophia stumbled on a rock. They were both soaked to the skin, their clothes heavy and clinging. They continued downstream for nearly a mile before Nathan spotted what he was looking for: a small cave carved into the riverbank by centuries of water. It wasn't deep, but it would provide shelter and concealment. In here, he said, helping Sophia climb up into the shallow cave. He followed, both of them huddling in the dim space as their eyes adjusted to the darkness. Will they follow us? Sophia asked, her teeth chattering from the cold and fear. They might try, Nathan replied, but crossing the river will make it harder to track us, and they'll be looking for two people on horseback, not on foot. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shivering. Without hesitation, Nathan moved closer, putting his arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry, he said softly. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. She shook her head. No, it's Holloway's doing, not yours. She leaned against him, grateful for his warmth. What will we do now? Wait until dark, he decided. Then make our way back to town. Our horses, hopefully they'll find their way back to Reynolds' place if Holloway's men don't take them, Nathan said. But horses can be replaced, you can't. The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sophia looked up at him, their faces close in the dimness of the cave. Nathan, she whispered, using his given name for the first time. His hand came up to touch her cheek gently. I meant what I said earlier, he murmured. About having a reason to stay in Placitas. Before she could respond, the sound of horses on the riverbank below made them both freeze. Sophia's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it could be heard outside the cave. They can't have come this far, a voice drifted up to them. The current's too strong, they probably drowned. Holloway won't be happy if the woman's dead, another voice responded. He wanted her alive. Better dead than with that cowboy, the way Holloway sees it, the first voice said. Come on, let's check further downstream. The horses moved away, the sound of hooves fading gradually. Nathan and Sophia remained still for several more minutes, afraid to make any sound that might give away their position. Finally, Nathan eased away from the cave entrance to look out. They're gone, he reported, relief evident in his voice. Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was too close. They'll keep looking, Nathan said grimly. Holloway isn't a man who gives up easily. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds visible through the cave entrance. When I came west, Sophia said suddenly, I wanted a new beginning, freedom to make my own choices. She gave a humorless laugh. I never imagined I'd end up hiding in a cave from a man who can't take no for an answer. Nathan took her hand. This won't be forever. Holloway may be powerful, but he's not above the law. We can go to the sheriff when we get back. Sheriff Parker. Sophia shook her head. He owes his position to Holloway's influence. He won't help us. Then we'll find another way, Nathan insisted. I won't let him hurt you, Sophia. The use of her given name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with their physical proximity. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Risking so much for me, in answer, Nathan leaned forward and kissed her gently. It was a brief touch, tender and questioning. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, looking for her reaction. Sophia reached up, touching his cheek where a day's growth of beard roughened his skin. I've never met anyone like you, she whispered. Is that good or bad? He asked with a small smile. Very good, she replied, and this time she was the one who leaned in, bringing their lips together again. This kiss was deeper, a meeting of equals, a declaration of feelings too new and fragile to put into words. When they finally broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. When we get back to town, he said, I want to court you properly, if you'll allow it. Sophia smiled. I'd like that very much. They stayed in the cave until full darkness had fallen, then carefully made their way along the riverbank. Nathan kept them close to the water, where the soft ground wouldn't retain clear footprints, occasionally guiding Sophia with a hand at the small of her back. It was well past midnight when they finally saw the lights of Placitas in the distance. They approached cautiously, using the cover of darkness to avoid being seen. Sophia's boarding house was on the edge of town, and they decided to go there first. Mrs. Winters will help us, Sophia said. She has no love for Victor Holloway. They reached the back of the boarding house without incident and knocked softly on the kitchen door. After a moment, a light appeared inside, and Mrs. Winters, wrapped in a faded dressing gown, peered out suspiciously. Miss Carter. She exclaimed in a loud whisper, quickly opening the door. And Mr. Jones, we've been so worried. Where have you been? You're soaking wet. It's a long story, Mrs. Winters, Sophia said as they stepped inside, but we need help. Quickly, they explained what had happened. Mrs. Winters's face grew increasingly grim as they spoke. That man has gone too far this time, she declared when they had finished. Taking the law into his own hands, sending men after you like that, she bustled about the kitchen, putting on water to heat and pulling out towels. Mr. Jones, there's a small room off the back porch where my late husband kept his tools. You can stay there tonight. No one will think to look for you here. Thank you, madam, Nathan said gratefully, accepting the towel she handed him. And you, Miss Carter, will go straight upstairs and get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death, Mrs. Winters continued. I'll bring up some hot tea. As Sophia turned to go, Nathan caught her hand. Will you be all right? She nodded. Yes, get some rest. We'll figure out what to do in the morning. He squeezed her hand once before releasing it, and Sophia felt the loss of his touch immediately. She climbed the stairs to her room, suddenly exhausted now that they were safe, at least for the moment. After changing into dry night clothes and wrapping herself in a warm shawl, Sophia sat by the window, looking out at the dark town. Somewhere out there, Victor Holloway was plotting his next move. The thought made her shiver despite the warm tea Mrs. Winters had brought up. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with rushing water and pursuing hoofbeats. She woke early, the pale light of dawn barely visible through her window. Dressing quickly, she went downstairs to find Mrs. Winters already in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with forceful movements that betrayed her agitation. Good morning, Sophia greeted her. Is Nathan Mr. Jones awake? Been up for an hour already, Mrs. Winters replied, nodding toward the back door. Said he needed to think. Sophia found him sitting on the back steps, a cup of coffee in his hands, staring out at the small garden behind the boarding house. Morning, he said, looking up with a smile that warmed her more than any sun could. Sleep well? Not really, she admitted, sitting beside him. I kept thinking about what happens next. Nathan nodded soberly. I've been thinking about that too. He set down his coffee cup. Sophia, Holloway won't stop, not as long as we're both in Placitas. Are you suggesting we leave? She asked, surprised. It might be the safest option, he said. At least until things cool down. Sophia considered this. Leaving would mean abandoning her students, her job, the life she had built here, but staying meant living in constant fear. Where would we go? She asked finally. I have a friend with a ranch near Santa Fe, Nathan replied. He'd give us work until we could decide on something more permanent. The we in his statement didn't escape her notice. You'd come with me. His eyes met hers, serious and steady. I wouldn't let you face this alone, Sophia. Before she could respond, they heard a commotion from the front of the house, raised voices, including Mrs. Winters's indignant tones. Nathan was on his feet instantly, pulling Sophia up with him. The shed, he said quickly. Go now, she hesitated. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Go, Sophia hurried to the small shed at the edge of the garden, slipping inside as she heard footsteps on the back porch. Through a crack in the weathered wood, she saw Victor Holloway himself confronting Nathan. Where is she? Victor demanded, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled as if he hadn't slept. Not here, Nathan answered calmly, though Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. Liar, Victor spat. My men tracked you to the river. You couldn't have made it back to town without help. Your men tried to kill us, Nathan said, his voice hard. That's attempted murder, Holloway. Even your money can't buy your way out of that, Victor laughed harshly. Who's going to stop me? Sheriff Parker. He knows which side his bread is buttered on. He stepped closer to Nathan. I want the woman. She's mine by rights. I saw her first. She doesn't belong to anyone, Nathan replied, his hands clenched at his sides. Especially not to a man who'd send thugs to hunt her down. Victor's face contorted with rage. You've turned her against me. She was warming to me before you showed up. That's not how I heard it, Nathan said. Seems to me she was saying no long before I came to town. With a roar of fury, Victor lunged at Nathan, who sidestepped neatly, causing the rancher to stumble on the steps. Nathan made no move to counterattack, simply watching as Victor regained his balance. Get off this property, Nathan said evenly, before I forget my manners. This isn't over, Victor snarled. Not by a long shot. He backed away, pointing a finger at Nathan. I'll find her. And when I do, you'll wish you'd never set foot in Placitas. He stalked away around the side of the house. Nathan waited until he was out of sight, then hurried to the shed where Sophia was hiding. We need to leave, he said without preamble as he opened the door. Today. He'll be watching the roads, but if we wait until dark, Nathan, Sophia interrupted, stepping out of the shed. I can't keep running. This is my home now. It's not safe, he argued. You heard him. He won't stop. Then we need to make him stop, she said firmly. There must be someone in authority who would listen to us. The territorial marshal, perhaps. Nathan considered this. It could take weeks for a marshal to respond, and that's assuming he would take our word over Holloway's. They were interrupted by Mrs. Winters calling from the back door. Miss Carter, Mr. Jones, come quickly. They hurried inside to find Mrs. Winters in the kitchen with a young boy, one of Sophia's students. Tell them what you told me, Tommy, Mrs. Winters urged. The boy, about 10 years old, looked up at Sophia with wide eyes. Miss Carter, Mr. Holloway's got men watching all the roads out of town, and he told my pa that he's offering $50 to anyone who brings you to his ranch. He glanced at Nathan. And $100 to anyone who brings him Mr. Jones, dead or alive. Sophia gasped, her hand going to her throat. Nathan's expression hardened. Thank you for the warning, Tommy, he said, giving the boy a coin from his pocket. You'd best get on home now and don't tell anyone you saw us. When the boy had gone, Nathan turned to Mrs. Winters. Madam, we need to leave Placitas, but Holloway's made that difficult. Is there another way out of town that his men might not know about? Mrs. Winters thought for a moment. There's an old mining trail that runs behind the cemetery. It's overgrown now, but it connects to the main road about 5 miles south of town. My Herbert used to hunt along it. That could work, Nathan said, his mind already planning. We'd need horses, supplies. I can help with food, Mrs. Winters offered. And my neighbor, Mr. Grayson, has a couple of mules he uses for his garden. He has no love for Holloway either, after what happened to his son last year. Mules aren't ideal, but they're better than going on foot, Nathan decided. Sophia, can you be ready to leave by nightfall? She nodded, though her heart was heavy at the thought of leaving so suddenly. I'll need to pack a few things. Only what you can carry in a small bag, Nathan cautioned. We need to travel light. The day passed in tense preparation. Mrs. Winters went to speak with her neighbor about the mules, returning with news that he had agreed to help. She spent the afternoon baking bread and preparing food they could take with them, while Nathan cleaned his revolver and made plans for their journey. Sophia stayed in her room most of the day, carefully selecting what few possessions she could take. She packed her mother's silver locket, a small Bible, a change of clothes, and the money she had saved from her teaching salary. It seemed so little to show for the life she had built here. As evening approached, Nathan came to her door. Are you ready? She nodded, her small carpetbag in hand. As ready as I'll ever be. He took her free hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles in a comforting gesture. I'm sorry it has to be this way. It's not your fault, she said softly. You've done nothing but try to protect me. They went downstairs to find Mrs. Winters waiting with a bundle of food and a determined expression. Mr. Grayson will bring the mules to the back of the cemetery at nightfall, she said. I've packed enough food for several days and there's a blanket for each of you. She pressed a small purse into Sophia's hand, and this is for emergencies. Mrs. Winters, I can't take your money. You most certainly can, the older woman interrupted firmly. Consider it an investment in your future happiness. She gave Nathan a pointed look that made both of them blush. As darkness fell, they said their goodbyes to Mrs. Winters, promising to send word once they were safely away. They slipped out the back door and made their way cautiously through town, staying to the shadows and avoiding the main streets. The cemetery lay on the eastern edge of Placitas, a quiet stretch of land dotted with wooden crosses and the occasional stone marker. Mr. Grayson was waiting as promised, 2 sturdy mules already saddled and loaded with their supplies. Keep to the trail as best you can, he advised in a low voice. It joins up with the main road past Dawson's Creek. From there, it's a straight shot to Santa Fe if that's where you're headed. "Thank you for your help," Nathan said, shaking the man's hand. "We won't forget it." "Just get Miss Carter to safety," Mr. Grayson replied. "That's thanks enough. Holloway's been lording it over this town for too long." They mounted the mules, Sophia somewhat awkwardly in her skirts, and set off along the overgrown trail that was barely visible in the darkness. Nathan led the way, occasionally stopping to ensure they were still on the right path. They had been traveling for perhaps an hour when Sophia heard at the distant sound of horses moving fast. "Nathan," she whispered urgently. He nodded, having heard it too. "Off the trail," he directed, guiding his mule into the dense brush alongside the path. Sophia followed, branches catching at her clothes as they pushed deeper into the undergrowth. The sounds grew louder hoofbeats, men's voices. They were coming along the main trail, the one they had just left. How did they know? Sophia breathed, fear tightening her chest. Nathan shook his head, his expression grim in the faint moonlight. "Someone must have seen us leave town." They remained motionless in their hiding place as the riders passed by, holding the mules' reins tightly to prevent them from making noise. When the sounds had faded into the distance, Nathan let out a slow breath. "They're heading toward the main road," he said. "They expect us to take the direct route to Santa Fe." "What do we do now?" Sophia asked. Nathan considered for a moment. "We change direction, head west instead of north. There are smaller settlements where we might find help, or at least somewhere to hide until things cool down." They turned the mules around, picking their way carefully through the brush until they found another trail heading westward. The going was slower now, the path less defined, but they pushed on through the night, both aware that stopping for too long could be dangerous. Dawn found them in rough, hilly country, the trail winding between rocky outcroppings. They were both exhausted, having ridden through the night, but fear kept them moving. When the sun was fully up, Nathan finally called a halt in a sheltered hollow where a small stream provided water. "We'll rest for a few hours," he decided, helping Sophia down from her mule. "Then push on during the heat of the day when Holloway's men are less likely to be searching." Sophia practically collapsed onto the ground, her muscles aching from the unfamiliar hours in the saddle. Nathan watered the mules, then sat beside her, offering some of Mrs. Winters's bread and dried beef. "You should try to sleep," he suggested after they had eaten. "I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," she protested, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "I'll wake you in a couple of hours and take my turn then," he promised. Sophia was too tired to argue further. Using her carpet bag as a pillow, she lay down on the blanket Mrs. Winters had provided. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive as her mind churned with worries. What would become of them? How long would they need to run? Would Victor Holloway ever give up his pursuit? She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to Nathan's gentle touch on her shoulder. The sun was high overhead now, its heat intense even in their shaded hollow. "My turn to keep watch," she said, sitting up and pushing her hair from her face. Nathan nodded, lying down on his own blanket. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep, the lines of worry temporarily smoothed from his face. Sophia watched him for a while, allowing herself to acknowledge the depth of feeling that had grown between them in such a short time. She had never believed in the kind of whirlwind romance she'd read about in novels, yet here she was, fleeing across the territory with a man she'd known for barely a month. A man who had risked everything to protect her. A man whose smile made her heart race and whose touch sent warmth spreading through her entire being. The afternoon passed slowly. Sophia kept watch as promised, alert for any sign of pursuit, but the landscape remained empty and silent apart from the occasional bird or the rustle of a small animal in the underbrush. When Nathan woke, they repacked their supplies and continued westward. The terrain grew increasingly rough, forcing them to move slowly and pick their way carefully along steep trails. By sunset, they had reached a high ridge overlooking a valley. "There's a settlement down there," Nathan said, pointing to distant lights twinkling in the gathering darkness. "Looks like a small farming community. We might find help there." They made their way down into the valley as night fell, approaching the settlement cautiously. It was indeed small, perhaps a dozen houses clustered around a crossroads, with fields of corn and wheat surrounding them. A sign at the edge of town read, "Welcome to Esperanza." Hope, Sophia translated softly. A fitting name, perhaps. They stopped at what appeared to be the only public building, a combination general store and gathering place with a few tables outside. An elderly man was sweeping the porch as they approached. "Evening, travelers," he called out. "You're a fair ways from the main road." "We've had some trouble," Nathan replied carefully, "looking for a place to rest for the night." The old man leaned on his broom, studying them. "Ain't got no hotel here in Esperanza, but Widow Martinez sometimes takes in travelers for a small fee." He pointed down the road. "Blue house with the big oak tree." They thanked him and continued to the house he had indicated. A plump, gray-haired woman answered their knock, her dark eyes sharp as she took in their trail-worn appearance. "Mrs. Martinez?" Nathan asked. "We were told you sometimes provide lodging for travelers." "For honest folk, yes," she replied, her accent thick but her English clear. "Are you honest folk, young man?" "Yes, madam," Nathan said. "We're just looking for a safe place to rest for the night. We can pay." She studied them for a moment longer, then nodded, opening the door wider. "Come in, then. I have a room at the back for travelers, and your lady looks dead on her feet." Sophia flushed at being called Nathan's lady, but was too exhausted to correct the assumption. They followed Mrs. Martinez through the small, neat house to a back room furnished simply with a bed, a chair, and a washstand. "There's only the one bed," Mrs. Martinez said, giving Nathan a stern look. "I expect propriety under my roof, married or not." "Of course, madam," Nathan assured her quickly. "I'll sleep on the floor," the woman nodded, apparently satisfied. "I'll bring some hot water for washing, and there's stew left from supper if you're hungry." When she had gone, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed with a sigh of relief. "She seems kind." "And observant," Nathan added. "We should be careful what we say. The less she knows about our troubles, the better." They ate the promised stew gratefully. It was the first hot meal they'd had since leaving Placitas, and took turns using the hot water to wash away the dust of travel. When Sophia returned from her turn at the washstand, she found Nathan arranging his blanket on the floor beside the bed. "You don't have to sleep on the floor," she said hesitantly. "The bed is large enough, and we've been through so much together already." Nathan looked up at her, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. "Are you sure?" Sophia nodded. "Just to sleep," she clarified, feeling her cheeks warm. I'd feel safer with you near." Without another word, Nathan moved his blanket to the bed. They lay down together, a careful distance between them at first, both acutely aware of the other's presence. But as the tension of the day finally released its hold, Sophia found herself shifting closer until her head rested against Nathan's shoulder. His arm came around her, holding her gently. "Sleep now," he murmured. "You're safe." And for the first time since they'd fled Placitas, Sophia believed it might be true. They stayed in Esperanza for 3 days, resting and gathering information. Mrs. Martinez proved to be an excellent source of local knowledge, though they were careful not to reveal too much about their own situation. "Holloway," she said when Nathan cautiously mentioned the name. "I know of him. Rich rancher with a mean streak, had some dealings with my late husband years back." She shook her head. "Not a man to cross." "Have you heard anything about him recently?" Nathan asked. "Any news from Placitas?" Mrs. Martinez considered this. "Raul Diaz came through yesterday, delivering goods from Santa Fe. Said there was talk of a rancher offering rewards for a missing woman and the man who took her." She looked at them sharply. "That wouldn't be you two, would it?" Sophia and Nathan exchanged glances. There was no point in denying it. Their reaction had already confirmed the widow's suspicion. "He's a dangerous man, Mrs. Martinez," Sophia said quietly. "We didn't do anything wrong. I refused his advances, and he couldn't accept that." The older woman's expression softened. "I thought it might be something like that. Men with power often think women are just another possession." She patted Sophia's hand. "You'll be safe here for now. Esperanza is too small for Holloway to bother with, and we take care of our own." "We're not your own," Nathan pointed out. "We're strangers." Mrs. Martinez smiled. "You're good people in trouble. That's enough for us." On their fourth morning in Esperanza, Nathan went to the general store to purchase supplies for their continuing journey. Sophia stayed behind, helping Mrs. Martinez with her garden as a way to repay the woman's kindness. They were weeding the vegetable patch when the sound of approaching horses made them both look up. 3 riders were coming down the main road, dust billowing behind them. "Get inside," Mrs. Martinez said sharply, dropping her gardening tools. "Quickly." Sophia didn't hesitate, hurrying into the house and closing the door behind her. Through the window, she watched as the riders stopped in front of the Martinez home. With a sinking heart, she recognized one of them, the scarred man who had tracked them to the river outside Placitas. Mrs. Martinez went to meet them, wiping her hands on her apron. Though Sophia couldn't hear what was said, she could see the widow shaking her head firmly. The lead rider leaned down from his horse, saying something that made Mrs. Martinez straighten her spine indignantly. The standoff continued for several minutes. Finally, the riders turned their horses and continued down the road toward the general store. Sophia's heart raced. Nathan was there. Mrs. Martinez came inside, her expression grim. "Holloway's men," she confirmed, "looking for you and your man. Said there's a reward." "Nathan's at the store," Sophia said urgently. "We have to warn him." "Miguel," Mrs. Martinez called, and a young boy of about 12 appeared from another room. "Run to the store. Tell the American man with the brown hat that his friends are looking for him, and he should come back here the back way. Quickly now." The boy nodded and darted out the back door. Mrs. Martinez turned to Sophia. "Pack your things. You'll need to leave as soon as he returns." Sophia gathered their few belongings with shaking hands. Would Miguel reach Nathan in time? What if Holloway's men recognized him at the store? She was just finishing when she heard the back door open. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his expression tense but relieved when he saw her. "Miguel got to me just before they came into the store," he explained. "I slipped out the back." He turned to Mrs. Martinez. "Thank you for the warning, madam." "They're asking all over town," the widow said. "It won't take them long to hear that I've had visitors staying with me. You need to go now before they come back." "Is there another way out of Esperanza?" Nathan asked. "They'll be watching the main road." Mrs. Martinez thought for a moment. "The old cattle trail behind the fields. It's hardly used now, but it leads west toward the river. From there, you could follow the river north." "North?" Sophia questioned. "Wouldn't that take us closer to Placitas?" "Eventually," Mrs. Martinez agreed. "But it would also take you to Fort Mackenzie. There's a military presence there. Even Holloway wouldn't dare challenge the army." Nathan nodded. "That could work. How far to the fort?" 2 days' ride, maybe 3 with those mules, the widow estimated. "I'll have Miguel bring them around back and take this." She hurried to a cupboard, returning with a small revolver. "It was my husband's. Not much good at a distance, but it might help if you're cornered." Within minutes, they were ready to leave. Mrs. Martinez gave them additional supplies and a roughly drawn map of the route to Fort Mackenzie. Miguel brought the mules to the back door, reporting that Holloway's men were still questioning people near the general store. "Go with God," Mrs. Martinez said, embracing Sophia. "And when this is over, perhaps you'll visit an old woman again." "We will," Sophia promised, blinking back tears. "Thank you for everything." They slipped away behind the houses, following a narrow path that led through the cornfields surrounding the settlement. Once past the cultivated land, they found the old cattle trail. Mrs. Martinez had mentioned little more than a worn track through the scrubland, but clear enough to follow. They rode in silence for a time, both lost in thought. The close call in Esperanza had shaken them, reminding them that even in the smallest settlements, Holloway's influence might reach. "Nathan," Sophia finally said as they paused to water the mules at a small stream. "Do you really think the army at Fort Mackenzie will help us?" He considered this. "They might. Military justice tends to be straightforward. If we can convince the commander that Holloway's actions constitute a threat to peace in the territory, he might intervene. And if not, then we keep moving," Nathan replied simply. "Find somewhere beyond Holloway's reach." He took her hand. "I meant what I said back in Placitas, Sophia. I'll stay with you as long as you want me to." She squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his touch. "I want that very much." They continued along the cattle trail as the day wore on, the landscape gradually changing as they approached the river Mrs. Martinez had mentioned. By late afternoon, they could see the line of cottonwoods marking its course ahead of them. "We'll make camp by the river tonight," Nathan decided. "Follow it north starting at first light." They found a sheltered spot among the trees and set up their simple camp. After tethering and feeding the mules, Nathan gathered wood for a small fire while Sophia prepared a meal from their supplies. As darkness fell, they sat close together by the fire, the sounds of the river providing a peaceful backdrop. "It's strange," Sophia mused. "A week ago I was teaching children their letters and planning lessons. Now I'm a fugitive. Do you regret it?" Nathan asked, watching her carefully. "Leaving with me," she turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "No. I've never felt more alive than I have these past days, despite the danger." She smiled slightly, or perhaps because of it. Nathan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "When this is over, what would you want, if you could have anything?" "Peace," she answered without hesitation. "A home, work that matters." She looked down, suddenly shy. "And you, if you wanted to stay." "I do want to stay," he said softly, "more than I've ever wanted anything." His hand cupped her cheek, drawing her gaze back to his. "I love you, Sophia Carter. I think I have since that first night in Placitas when you stood up to Holloway with your chin raised, refusing to be intimidated." Her breath caught at the declaration. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right, natural. "Through all of this, you've been my strength." He kissed her then, tender at first, then with increasing passion as she responded eagerly. His arms encircled her, pulling her close against him, and she marveled at how perfectly they fit together, as if they had been made for each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "When we reach Fort Mackenzie," he murmured, "will you marry me? I don't have a ring to offer you yet, or even a proper home, but I promise to spend my life making you happy." "Yes," she answered simply, joy flooding through her despite their uncertain situation. "Yes, I'll marry you, Nathan Jones." They sealed the promise with another kiss before reluctantly separating to bank the fire for the night. As they had in Esperanza, they lay together on their shared blankets, finding comfort in each other's presence as they drifted into sleep. The crack of a branch snapping jolted them both awake in the pre-dawn darkness. Nathan was on his feet instantly, revolver in hand, while Sophia sat up, her heart pounding. "Stay down," Nathan whispered, motioning for her to remain still. Another crack sounded, closer this time. Someone was moving through the trees toward their camp. Nathan positioned himself between the sound and Sophia, his stance tense and ready. A figure emerged from the darkness, then another. In the faint light of the banked fire, Sophia could make out the familiar scarred face of Holloway's man. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look at what we found, boys." The schoolteacher and her cowboy. Two more men appeared behind him, all armed with revolvers. "That's far enough," Nathan warned, his gun steady. "Put that down, Jones," the scarred man said. "You're outnumbered and Mr. Holloway wants the lady unharmed. Don't make us shoot you in front of her." Sophia stood slowly, moving to Nathan's side. "I won't go with you," she said firmly. "Tell Mr. Holloway I said no, and I meant it." The man laughed. "Ain't up to you, madam. Mr. Holloway pays good money and we aim to collect." He gestured to his companions. "Take her. Shoot him if he interferes." As the men started forward, Nathan raised his gun. "Take one more step and I'll put a bullet in you." The moment hung suspended, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Then, from the darkness behind Holloway's men came a new voice. "I suggest you gentlemen reconsider." All heads turned to see a line of uniformed men emerging from the trees, rifles raised. At their head was an officer in the unmistakable uniform of a cavalry captain. "This is a private matter," the scarred man snarled. "Military's got no business here. When armed men threaten civilians in territorial lands, it becomes my business," the captain replied calmly. "Lower your weapons. Now." For a tense moment, it seemed Holloway's men might resist. Then, seeing the odds against them, they slowly placed their guns on the ground. "Secure those weapons, Sergeant," the captain ordered, and one of his men moved forward to collect the discarded revolvers. Nathan lowered his own gun cautiously. "Captain, I'm Nathan Jones, and this is Miss Sophia Carter. We're grateful for your intervention." The officer nodded. "Captain Thomas Harrington, Fort Mackenzie. We've had reports of armed men searching for travelers in the area." He studied them curiously. "Mind telling me why these men are so interested in finding you?" "It's a long story, sir," Nathan replied. "But the short version is that a wealthy rancher named Victor Holloway has been harassing Miss Carter. When she refused his advances, he sent men after us." "Holloway," the captain repeated thoughtfully. "I know the name has something of a reputation." He turned to the scarred man. "And you are?" "Jed Wicks," the man muttered. "We ain't done nothing wrong, just collecting a bounty." "There is no legal bounty on these people," Captain Harrington said sharply. "What you're doing is attempted kidnapping, possibly worse." He gestured to his men. "Take them back to the fort. We'll sort this out there." As the soldiers led Holloway's men away, the captain turned back to Nathan and Sophia. "You two should come with us as well. You'll be safer at the fort while we investigate these claims." "We were headed to Fort Mackenzie anyway," Sophia said, relief evident in her voice. "We hope to find help there." "Well, it seems help found you instead," Captain Harrington said with a slight smile. "Can you ride? It's about half a day's journey from here." They quickly packed their few belongings and mounted their mules, joining the cavalry patrol for the ride to the fort. As they traveled, Nathan explained their situation more fully to the captain, who listened with growing concern. "This isn't the first complaint we've had about Holloway," he revealed. "There have been reports of intimidation against small ranchers, threats against traders who won't give him preferential rates. The territorial governor has been gathering evidence." "Would our testimony help?" Sophia asked. "Considerably," the captain affirmed. "Particularly yours, Miss Carter, as a direct victim of his harassment." Fort Mackenzie came into view around midday, a sturdy wooden stockade surrounding a collection of buildings on a plateau overlooking the river. As they rode through the gates, Sophia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in days, she felt truly safe. They were given quarters in the visitors' building, a simple but clean room not unlike the one they had shared at Mrs. Martinez's. Captain Harrington informed them that a territorial judge would arrive within a week to hear their testimony. "In the meantime," he added, "I've sent a detachment to Placitas to inform the local authorities of the situation and to ensure there are no further incidents. Holloway's men will be held here pending the judge's arrival." That evening, as they sat together in the small mess hall, Nathan reached across the table to take Sophia's hand. "It's almost over," he said softly. "Soon we can start thinking about the future." "Our future," she corrected with a smile. The next few days passed in relative peace. Sophia discovered that the fort's commander had a wife and young daughter who lived with him on the post, and she spent time with them, grateful for female companionship after days on the trail. Nathan, meanwhile, found common ground with many of the soldiers, most of whom had worked as cowboys or ranchers before joining the cavalry. He even participated in breaking a particularly spirited horse that had been giving the fort's hostler trouble. On their third day at the fort, Captain Harrington called them to his office. His expression was serious as they took seats across from his desk. "I've received word from Placitas," he began. "It seems that in your absence, certain facts about Mr. Holloway have come to light. Several women have come forward with similar stories of harassment, and a rancher named Reynolds has provided evidence of threats made against him when he hired Mr. Jones despite Holloway's objections." "What does this mean?" Sophia asked. "It means that when the judge arrives, he'll have more than just your testimony to consider," the captain explained. "The territorial governor has taken an interest in the case as well. Holloway's influence may be considerable, but it's not unlimited." Nathan squeezed Sophia's hand. "That's good news. There's more," Captain Harrington continued. "I took the liberty of contacting the church in Santa Fe. The chaplain there is willing to perform a marriage ceremony if that's still your intention." His eyes twinkled slightly. "Mrs. Harrington may have mentioned your engagement." Sophia blushed. "I did mention it to her, yes." Then, with your permission, I'll arrange for the chaplain to visit the fort after the judge has concluded his business, the captain offered, unless you'd prefer to wait and have a larger ceremony elsewhere. Nathan looked at Sophia questioningly. She shook her head. I don't need a grand wedding, just having people who care about us present would be enough. Then it's settled, Captain Harrington said, looking pleased. The judge should arrive in 3 days. In the meantime, consider yourselves guests of Fort Mackenzie. Those 3 days passed quickly. Sophia found herself enjoying the structured routine of fort life, while Nathan spent time discussing ranching techniques with the soldiers responsible for the fort's small herd. On the morning of the judge's expected arrival, Sophia was having tea with Mrs. Harrington when a commotion at the fort gates drew their attention. Looking out the window, she saw a cloud of dust approaching several riders coming at speed. That must be Judge Parker, Mrs. Harrington said, setting down her teacup. But as the riders came into clearer view, Sophia's blood ran cold. At the head of the group, his face contorted with fury even at this distance, was Victor Holloway himself. Oh no, she breathed. It's him, Holloway, Mrs. Harrington took one look at Sophia's pale face and rushed to the door, calling for her husband. By the time they reached the parade ground, Captain Harrington and several soldiers had already intercepted the arriving party. Victor Holloway sat astride his horse, glaring down at the captain. I want my men released, he was saying as Sophia and Mrs. Harrington approached. And I want that woman and the cowboy who took her. Mr. Holloway, the captain responded evenly, your men are being held on suspicion of attempted kidnapping. As for Miss Carter and Mr. Jones, they are under the protection of the United States Army until the territorial judge arrives to hear their testimony. Testimony, Victor scoffed. About what? A woman running off with her lover, that's hardly a crime requiring military intervention. The harassment of a respectable woman is a serious matter, Captain Harrington replied, as are threats of violence, attempted kidnapping, and offering illegal bounties. Victor's gaze landed on Sophia and his expression darkened further. There she is, he snarled. The woman who's caused all this trouble. He pointed an accusing finger. She led me on, made me think she welcomed my attentions, then ran off with that saddle tramp. That's a lie, Sophia exclaimed, unable to remain silent in the face of such falsehood. I never gave you any encouragement. I told you repeatedly that I wasn't interested. Nathan appeared beside her, his hand coming to rest supportively at the small of her back. Mr. Holloway, you've gone too far. It's over. It's over when I say it's over, Victor roared, suddenly drawing a whip from his saddle. Before anyone could react, he had lashed out, the whip slicing through the air toward Sophia. Nathan moved with lightning speed, his hand shooting out to catch the whip before it could strike her. The leather wrapped around his wrist, and he yanked hard, nearly pulling Victor from his horse. She's taken, Nathan said, his voice steady but vibrating with controlled rage. And if you ever come near her again, whip or no whip, you'll answer to me. There was a moment of stunned silence, then Captain Harrington stepped forward. Mr. Holloway, I am placing you under arrest for assault. Dismount immediately. For a second, it seemed Victor might resist. Then, seeing the rifles of the soldiers now trained on him, he slowly got down from his horse, his face a mask of hatred. This isn't over, he muttered as 2 soldiers took his arms. I have friends in Santa Fe and Washington. Take him to the guardhouse, Captain Harrington ordered, cutting off the threats, and separate him from his men. As Victor was led away, Sophia turned to Nathan, taking his hand where the whip had left a red mark around his wrist. You're hurt. It's nothing, he assured her, though he winced slightly when she touched the mark. Are you all right? She nodded, still shaken but resolute. Yes, thanks to you. Captain Harrington approached them, his expression concerned. Miss Carter, Mr. Jones, I apologize. We should have been more vigilant. It's not your fault, Captain, Nathan said. Men like Holloway think they're above the law. Well, he's about to discover otherwise, the captain replied grimly. The judge should arrive by nightfall. With this latest incident, I have no doubt about the outcome of his hearing. True to the captain's prediction, Judge Franklin arrived that evening, a stern-faced man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes. After being briefed on the situation, he announced that he would hear testimony first thing in the morning. The hearing was held in the fort's meeting hall with all available personnel in attendance. One by one, witnesses were called to testify, first the soldiers who had intercepted Holloway's men in the forest, then Nathan and Sophia themselves, describing the pattern of harassment that had driven them from Placitas. To Sophia's surprise, Mrs. Winters had also made the journey to Fort Mackenzie, along with Mr. Reynolds and several other residents of Placitas who had witnessed Victor's behavior or been victims of it themselves. Victor Holloway sat stone-faced throughout, occasionally whispering to the lawyer who had arrived with the judge to represent him. When it was his turn to speak, he maintained that Sophia had encouraged his attentions and that Nathan had stolen her away, turning her against him. Judge Franklin listened to all testimony impassively, taking careful notes. When the last witness had spoken, he cleared his throat. Having heard all evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to bind over Victor Holloway and his accomplices for trial in the territorial court on charges of harassment, attempted kidnapping, assault, and inciting unlawful pursuit. He fixed Victor with a stern gaze. Bail is denied due to the risk of flight and potential witness intimidation. The prisoners will be transferred to Santa Fe for trial at the earliest opportunity. As Victor was led away, his face a mask of impotent rage, Sophia felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't over entirely. There would still be a trial, but Holloway's power to harm them had been broken. "It's really over," she whispered to Nathan as the gathering began to disperse. "Not quite," he replied with a small smile. "There's still one more thing we need to do." 2 days later, Sophia stood in Mrs. Harrington's quarters, looking at her reflection in the small mirror. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that the captain's wife had helped her alter from one of her own gowns. Her hair was arranged simply but elegantly with small wildflowers woven into the braids. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Harrington said warmly, adjusting the fall of the skirt. "Absolutely radiant." "I'm nervous," Sophia admitted, "which is silly considering everything we've been through." "It's not silly at all," the older woman assured her. "I was terrified on my wedding day, and Thomas and I had been courting for 2 years, she patted Sophia's hand. "But when I saw him waiting for me, all the nerves just melted away." A knock at the door announced Captain Harrington, who had offered to escort Sophia to the small chapel that had been set up in the fort's meeting hall. "Miss Carter," he said with a warm smile as his wife opened the door. "May I say you look lovely? Mr. Jones is a fortunate man." "Thank you, Captain," Sophia replied, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "I believe I'm the fortunate one." The walk to the meeting hall seemed both endless and far too short. As they approached, Sophia could hear the soft notes of a violin one of the soldiers, she had learned, was quite accomplished and had offered to play for the ceremony. Captain Harrington paused at the door. "Ready," Sophia nodded, and he opened the door. The meeting hall had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, the work of Mrs. Harrington and several of the soldiers' wives. The benches were filled with the fort's personnel and the visitors from Placitas who had come for the hearing. And there, at the front beside the chaplain, stood Nathan. He had borrowed a proper suit from one of the officers, and his hair was neatly combed, but what struck Sophia most was the look on his face as he saw her, a mixture of awe, joy, and love so intense it took her breath away. Mrs. Harrington had been right. The moment Sophia saw Nathan waiting for her, all her nerves vanished, replaced by a certainty so profound it felt like coming home after a long journey. She barely remembered walking down the aisle, Captain Harrington's arm steady beneath her hand. She was aware only of Nathan's eyes on her, drawing her forward as surely as the North Star guides a traveler. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They had chosen traditional vows, the familiar words taking on new depth and meaning as they promised to love, honor, and cherish one another for all their days. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan drew her into a kiss that was both tender and filled with promise, to the cheers and applause of their assembled friends. The celebration afterward was simple but joyous. The fort's cook had prepared a special meal, and several bottles of champagne had mysteriously appeared, Captain Harrington, Sophia suspected, though he denied any knowledge of their origin. As the evening wore on, Sophia found a moment to speak with Mrs. Winters, who had watched the ceremony with tears in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough for everything you did for us," Sophia told her, embracing the older woman warmly. "Nonsense," Mrs. Winters replied, though she returned the embrace with equal warmth. "I only did what any decent person would do, and I got to see you married to a good man, which is reward enough." "Will you return to Placitas?" Sophia asked. "Of course, it's my home." Mrs. Winters patted her hand, "And with Holloway gone, it will be a better place." "The school children miss you, though." "I miss them too," Sophia admitted, "but Nathan and I need to make a fresh start somewhere new. Speaking of which," Mrs. Winters said with a knowing smile, "your husband seems to be looking for you." Sophia turned to see Nathan approaching, a fond expression on his face as he watched them. He had loosened his tie and looked more comfortable now than he had in the borrowed suit during the ceremony. "May I steal my wife for a dance, Mrs. Winters?" he asked, offering the older woman a respectful nod. "You may indeed, Mr. Jones," she replied with a twinkle in her eye. "Take good care of her." "I intend to," he promised, taking Sophia's hand and leading her to the center of the room where other couples were already dancing to the violin music. As they moved together, Sophia felt a peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Nathan's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Captain Harrington mentioned that there's a small ranch for sale about a day's ride from the fort. The owner is getting on in years and wants to move back east to live with his daughter." "A ranch of our own," Sophia's eyes widened. "Could we afford such a thing? With what I've saved, and if we're careful, yes." His expression grew more serious. "It won't be easy at first. Ranch life is hard work, especially starting out, but there's a small house on the property and the nearest town is looking for a teacher." "It sounds perfect," Sophia said, her heart swelling with hope for their future. "When can we see it?" "Tomorrow, if you'd like." His smile returned. "The captain offered to send an escort with us just to be safe." "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Let's go tomorrow." Later that night, in the privacy of the quarters that had been prepared for them as a wedding gift, Sophia and Nathan came together as husband and wife, their love for each other expressed in tender touches and whispered words of devotion. As she lay in Nathan's arms afterward, watching the moonlight filter through the simple curtains, Sophia reflected on the strange path that had led them here, from that first confrontation on the streets of Placitas to this moment of perfect contentment. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best," she replied, turning to face him. "If Victor Holloway hadn't been so persistent in his unwanted attentions, we might never have found each other." "I'd have found you somehow," Nathan said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be," Sophia smiled, settling more comfortably against him. "I believe you're right, Mr. Jones." "I usually am, Mrs. Jones," he teased, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now get some sleep." "We have a ranch to inspect tomorrow." The property exceeded their expectations. Situated in a fertile valley with a clear stream running through it, the Willow Creek Ranch was modest in size but well maintained. The house was small but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a comfortable living area, and a kitchen with a large stone fireplace. The aging owner, Mr. Simmons, seemed pleased to show them around, pointing out improvements he had made over the years and introducing them to the small herd of cattle that came with the property. "Not much compared to the big spreads," he acknowledged, "but enough to make a decent living if you're willing to work hard." "It's perfect," Sophia said, her eyes shining as she looked around the cozy house. "Absolutely perfect." They completed the purchase that same day, using the money Nathan had saved from years of ranch work. Mr. Simmons agreed to stay on for a week to show Nathan the particulars of the operation before heading east to his daughter's home. True to their word, the military escort remained with them during this transition, though there had been no sign of trouble. News had reached them that Victor Holloway had been transferred to Santa Fe to await trial, his influence diminished by the multiple testimonies against him. On their first night alone in their new home, after Mr. Simmons had departed and the soldiers had returned to the fort, Sophia and Nathan stood on the small porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. "We did it," Nathan said, his arm around her shoulders. "It's really ours." "Our home," Sophia agreed, leaning into his embrace. "I can hardly believe it, he said, turning her to face him. "This is just the beginning, Sophia. Everything we've dreamed of will build together." As the months passed, they settled into ranch life, working side by side to make the property thrive. Sophia secured a position at the small school in the nearby town of Cedar Creek, riding in 3 days a week to teach while Nathan managed the ranch. They faced challenges, of course a harsh winter storm that threatened the herd, a period of drought that made the stream run low, the natural difficulties of building a life together. But they faced each obstacle as they had faced Holloway's threats together, drawing strength from their love for each other. Word reached them periodically about the situation in Placitas. Victor Holloway had been convicted and sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. His ranch had been sold to pay his debts and legal costs, with Mr. Reynolds purchasing a significant portion of the land. Mrs. Winters wrote regularly, keeping them informed of town news and expressing her hope that they would visit someday. A year after they settled at Willow Creek, Sophia discovered she was expecting a child. Nathan's joy at the news was boundless, and he threw himself into preparing for the baby's arrival with characteristic thoroughness, adding a nursery to their home and crafting a beautiful wooden cradle with his own hands. In the spring, their son was born a healthy, strong boy with Nathan's dark hair and Sophia's thoughtful eyes. They named him Thomas, after Captain Harrington, who had helped them find their way to this happy life. As Sophia sat in the rocking chair by the nursery window, nursing her son while watching Nathan tend to the vegetable garden they had planted together, she reflected on how far they had come from those terrifying days of flight and uncertainty. From the moment Nathan had stood up to Victor Holloway on that dusty street in Placitas, declaring with his actions that she deserved respect and protection, their lives had been intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. The path hadn't been easy, but every step had led them here to this peaceful home, this loving family, this life built on mutual respect and deep affection. Outside, Nathan looked up from his work, catching her eye through the window. He smiled, a private smile meant only for her, and Sophia felt the same flutter in her heart that she had experienced the first time he looked at her that way. Some things, it seemed, were indeed meant to be. 5 years after they had settled at Willow Creek Ranch, the Jones family had grown and prospered. Thomas, now an active 4-year-old with his father's curiosity and his mother's love of books, had been joined by a sister, Emma, just turning 2. The ranch had expanded as well. With careful management and hard work, Nathan had been able to increase their herd and purchase additional land. Sophia continued teaching in Cedar Creek, now with a small building dedicated solely to the school rather than the back room of the general store where she had started. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, a cloud of dust on the road caught their attention. Visitors were rare at Willow Creek, especially unannounced ones. "Stay here with the children," Nathan said, rising to his feet. Old habits died hard, and though they had heard nothing of Victor Holloway since his imprisonment, caution had become second nature. Sophia gathered the children close as Nathan walked down to the gate, his hand resting casually near the revolver he still wore when working the ranch. As the riders came into clearer view, however, his posture relaxed. "Sophia," he called, turning back with a smile. "It's Mrs. Winters and Mr. Reynolds." Delight replaced apprehension as Sophia hurried down to greet their old friends, the children following curiously. Mrs. Winters, a bit grayer but as spry as ever, dismounted with Nathan's help, while Mr. Reynolds, the rancher who had given Nathan his first job in Placitas, tipped his hat in greeting. What a wonderful surprise, Sophia exclaimed, embracing Mrs. Winters warmly. Why didn't you let us know you were coming and give you time to fuss? Nonsense, Mrs. Winters replied with a laugh. We wanted to see you as you really live, not all polished up for visitors. Well, you've certainly succeeded, Sophia said, gesturing ruefully at her simple work dress and the children's dusty play clothes. You look perfect, Mrs. Winters assured her, bending to greet Thomas and Emma. And these must be the little ones you've written about. My, how they've grown. As Nathan helped Mr. Reynolds with the horses, Sophia led Mrs. Winters to the house, the children trailing behind, suddenly shy in the presence of strangers. Inside, she busied herself preparing refreshments while Mrs. Winters settled in the parlor, admiring the comfortable home they had created. It suits you, the older woman observed when Sophia returned with a tray of lemonade. This life, you both look happy. We are, Sophia confirmed, her gaze drifting to the window where she could see Nathan and Mr. Reynolds deep in conversation by the corral. Very happy. I'm glad, Mrs. Winters said sincerely. Especially considering what brought you together, Sophia turned back to her. Speaking of which, is there any news of him? Mrs. Winters understood immediately. Victor Holloway was released from prison 6 months ago, she said carefully. He left the territory immediately afterward. Last I heard, he had gone to California. A small knot of tension that Sophia hadn't realized she was carrying loosened at the news. Good, I hope he stays away. I believe he will, Mrs. Winters assured her. Placitas has changed since you left. The new sheriff is a fair man, not beholden to any of the big ranchers, and Mr. Reynolds has become quite influential in the region. By the time Nathan and Mr. Reynolds joined them, Sophia had set out a simple but hearty meal, and the atmosphere was warm and convivial. Their guests shared news of Placitas' marriages, births, the expansion of the town with a new hotel and bank, while Sophia and Nathan spoke of their life at Willow Creek. We've been thinking, Nathan said as they enjoyed coffee after the meal, the children now in bed after extracting promises of stories from Mrs. Winters in the morning. It might be time for a visit to Placitas. It's been 5 years and the children should know where their parents' story began. That would be wonderful, Mrs. Winters exclaimed. In fact, it's partly why we came. The town is planning a harvest festival next month and many people have asked about you too. Sophia and Nathan exchanged glances. I think we could manage that, Sophia said. The school term will be finished and the fall roundup will be done by then. Excellent, Mr. Reynolds said, looking pleased. You can stay at my place. Got plenty of room now that I've built the new house. As they continued making plans for the visit, Sophia felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with fear and flight would be closed with a peaceful return, not as fugitives but as a family. The harvest festival in Placitas was a joyous occasion. The town had indeed grown, with several new buildings along the main street and many new faces among the familiar ones. Yet the welcome they received was warm and genuine, with many of Sophia's former students now young adults coming to greet their teacher and meet her family. Even the sight of her confrontation with Victor Holloway had been transformed. The spot where he had accosted her that night, where Nathan had first come to her defense, was now occupied by a small park with benches and flower beds. It's hard to believe it all happened here, Sophia said as they walked through the park, Thomas running ahead while Nathan carried Emma. It seems like another lifetime. In many ways it was, Nathan replied, shifting Emma to his other arm as she dozed against his shoulder. We were different people then. Sophia took his free hand, squeezing it gently. Not so different. You were brave and kind then, just as you are now. He smiled at her, the same smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. And you were stubborn and principled, just as you are now. Stubborn, she protested with mock indignation. In the best possible way, he assured her, leaning down to kiss her lightly. It's one of the things I love most about you. The festival itself was a whirlwind of activities, games for the children, dancing, a community feast with dishes contributed by every family. Sophia and Nathan found themselves at the center of much attention, with people eager to hear about their life at Willow Creek, and to share their own stories of the changes in Placitas. As the evening drew to a close, with Thomas asleep on a bench despite the noise and Emma long since taken back to the Reynolds ranch by a kindly neighbor, Nathan led Sophia away from the crowds to a quiet spot under the stars. "Happy?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "Very," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "Though I'll be glad to get back home to Willow Creek." "Me too," he agreed. "But I'm glad we came. It feels right somehow to see Placitas again, to remember where we started." Sophia looked up at him, her heart full of the love that had grown and deepened through all they had shared. "I knew from that first night when you stood between me and Victor Holloway that you were someone special," she said softly. "I just didn't know then how special you would become to me." "And I knew from the moment I saw you facing him down, refusing to be intimidated despite your fear, that you were worth fighting for," Nathan replied, his arms tightening around her. "I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat." "As would I," Sophia whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him under the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting all those years ago. In the life they had built together, far from the danger and drama of their beginning, they had found something precious. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and enduring love. From the moment Nathan had caught that whip, declaring with actions more powerful than words that she deserved better, their fates had been intertwined, two souls finding in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it most. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and their ranch prospered, that bond only strengthened, a testament to the truth that sometimes, even in the wild and unpredictable terrain of life, love finds a way to bloom and flourish against all odds.